As Josh strolled down the street, he spotted his buddy Michael rushing along, his arms weighed down with shopping bags. "Michael, you okay? You look a little frazzled," Josh asked. Michael sighed, setting the bags down. "Yeah, I just came back from that new state-of-the-art supermarket they opened over in the industrial area." Josh's eyes lit up. "Oh, I've heard about that place. What's it like?" Michael hesitated, then began describing it with reluctant enthusiasm. "It's pretty amazing, I guess. The whole store is designed to feel authentic and natural. In the milk section, you can hear cows mooing and even catch the scent of a barn. In the egg aisle, there's this chicken coop above you with hens cackling away. In the vegetable section, it's like walking through a field, dirt smells, farmers' voices, the works." Josh whistled, impressed. "Wow, that sounds incredible." Michael grimaced and grabbed his bags. "Yeah, in theory. But let me tell you, this is the last time I go there to buy toilet paper." A woman's closet door made a terrible creaking noise every time a bus passed by on the street outside, so she called a carpenter to investigate. The carpenter arrived and inspected the closet but couldn't find anything unusual. Suddenly, a bus passed by and the closet groaned loudly. Startled, the carpenter frowned. "That's strange," he muttered. "Maybe if I sit inside and wait for the next bus, I can figure out what's causing it." The woman agreed, and the carpenter climbed into the closet. A few minutes later, the husband came home. Spotting the closed closet door, he opened it and froze at the sight of a man sitting inside. Suspicious, the husband glared at the carpenter. "What the heck are you doing in my house? In my closet?" The carpenter, sweating bullets, stammered, "Would you believe me if I said I'm waiting for the bus?" A philosopher, a mathematician, a chemist, and a physicist were sitting together at a coffee shop. The physicist smirked at the chemist and said, "You know, chemistry is just applied physics." They all chuckled at the chemist. The mathematician then turned to the physicist and said, "Well, physics is just applied mathematics." The group laughed harder, this time at the physicist. "And mathematics, that's just applied philosophy." The laughter reached its peak until the mathematician leaned over, smirked, and said, "That's cute. Now go fetch the coffee I ordered." A Chinese man visits Los Angeles for a holiday. Upon landing at LAX, he hails a cab to take him to his hotel. As they drive, he notices a few buses rumbling along. "Wow," he says to the driver, "the buses here are so noisy and slow. In China, our buses are much faster." The cabbie stays quiet. A little later, they pass by a marina with boats drifting lazily in the water. The man remarks again, "And look at these boats, so slow. In China, our boats are much faster." The driver still says nothing. When they finally arrive at the hotel, the man asks for the fare. The driver shows him the meter, and the tourist's jaw drops. "What? Your buses are slow, your boats are slow. Why is your taxi meter so fast?" The cabbie flashes a grin and replies, "Because it's made in China." A large corporation hires a tribe of ex-cannibals, promising them full employee rights, except they're not allowed to eat anyone. Everything goes smoothly for weeks. Then one day, the CEO calls the tribe into his office. "One of our employees has gone missing," he says. "And this is awkward, but did you eat them?" The tribe's chief checks with his people and responds, "No, sir, we haven't eaten anyone. We've left that behind us." The CEO, though still suspicious, has no proof, so he lets them return to work. Once they're out of earshot, the chief turns to his people and asks, "All right, who ate them?" A tribesman reluctantly raises his hand. "I ate the cleaning lady," he admits. The chief slaps his forehead in frustration and growls, "You idiot! We've been eating department heads, marketing execs, and efficiency consultants for weeks, and nobody noticed. But you had to go and eat someone they'll actually miss." 3 technicians apply for a job at the local telephone company. The boss, impressed by their qualifications, tells them, "You have 1 day to impress me. Go out and set as many telephone poles as you can and report back tomorrow." The next day, they return to the boss's office. The first guy says, "I set 13 poles." "Wow, 13, that's impressive," says the boss. The second guy says, "I set 9. "Not bad, but still impressive," the boss says. The third guy with wind-blown blonde hair confidently says, I set 2. 2? The boss exclaims, That's it? What were you doing all day? The third guy shrugs and says, Well, I didn't want to be a snitch, but those 2, the other guys only put theirs halfway in the ground. A stockbroker walks by a kid selling lemonade and notices the sign says, Lemonade $50. Intrigued, he approaches. Stockbroker, Hey kid, I think you mean 50 cents. Little girl, Nope, $50. I need the money for space camp. The stockbroker pauses, impressed by the hustle, but thinks the price is wrong. Stockbroker, Sweetie, you have to charge what people are willing to pay. No one's going to pay that much for lemonade. What do you think is a fair price? Little girl, $50, mister. Stockbroker, All right. I studied economics at Harvard, so let me teach you a little business. Your lemonade probably costs 50 cents to make, right? I'll pay you 10 times that to help you understand markup. He hands her $1. Little girl, No thanks, mister. $50, please. Stockbroker, Fine, I'll buy 2 of your brownies instead. He pays for the brownies and eats one in front of her, but suddenly starts choking and gagging. Stockbroker, What is in these? Little girl, My special recipe: eggs, flour, butter, cocoa sawdust, and goat pellets. Stockbroker, This is awful. I need to wash this taste out. The little girl, grinning, pulls out a jar of $50 bills and asks, Want some lemonade? Agency, Sir, we found 3 candidates as per your requirements. How would you like their placements? Manager, Here's what I want you to do. Put 100 bricks in a closed room, then send the candidates in, lock the door, and leave them alone for a few hours. After that, analyze the situation. If they're counting the bricks, put them in accounts. If they're recounting the bricks, put them in auditing. If they've messed up the whole room with bricks, put them in engineering. If they're arranging the bricks in strange orders, put them in planning. If they're throwing the bricks at each other, put them in operations. If they're sleeping, put them in security. If they're breaking the bricks into pieces, put them in IT. If they're sitting idle, put them in HR. If they claim they've tried different combinations but no bricks have moved, put them in sales. If they've already left for the day, put them in marketing. If they're staring out the window, put them in strategic planning. And if they're talking to each other and not a single brick has been touched, congratulate them and put them in management. A man walks into a restaurant and is seated. All the waitresses are incredibly beautiful. A particularly stunning one comes over to his table and asks, What would you like, sir? The man looks at the menu, then at her, and says, A quickie. The waitress looks appalled, turns, and storms off. After a moment, she returns, regaining her composure, and asks again, What would you like, sir? The man, still focused on her beauty, responds, A quickie, please. This time, her anger gets the best of her. She slaps him hard across the face with a loud smack and storms away. A man sitting at the next table leans over and whispers, I think it's pronounced quiche. A duck walks into a store and waddles up to the manager. Do you sell duck food? He asks. The shopkeeper replies, No, we don't. The duck nods and leaves. The next day, the duck returns and asks the same question. The shopkeeper, now a little irritated, replies, I told you yesterday we don't sell duck food. The duck leaves quietly. The day after that, the duck returns again and asks the same question. The shopkeeper, now getting frustrated, says, I've told you twice already we do not sell duck food. If you ask me one more time, I'll staple your feet to the floor. The duck leaves without a word. The next day, the duck waddles back in. He walks up to the shopkeeper, who's now red-faced and fuming, and asks, Do you sell staples? The shopkeeper, confused, says, No, we don't. Great, says the duck. Do you sell duck food? A trucker walks into a truck stop diner and places his order. I'll have 3 flat tires, a pair of headlights, and a pair of running boards, he says. The blonde waitress, not wanting to appear dumb, heads to the kitchen and asks the cook, This guy out there just ordered 3 flat tires, a pair of headlights, and running boards. What does he think this is? An auto parts store? The cook chuckles and explains, 3 flat tires means 3 pancakes, a pair of headlights means 2 eggs sunny side up, and running boards are 2 slices of crispy bacon. "Oh, I get it now," says the waitress and heads back to the trucker's table. A moment later, she returns with a bowl of beans and sets it down in front of him. The trucker looks puzzled. "What are the beans for?" he asks. She smiles and says, "Well, while you're waiting for your flat tires, headlights, and running boards, I thought you might as well gas up." A soap factory faced a problem. Sometimes they shipped empty boxes without soap inside, which damaged their reputation with buyers and distributors. Realizing the importance of these relationships, the CEO assembled his best team to fix it. 6 months and $8 million later, they had a fantastic solution. On time, on budget, and high quality. Everyone was thrilled with the outcome. The solution was a special scale. It would ring a bell and flash lights whenever a soap box weighed less than it should. The line would stop, someone would remove the defective box, and then press a button to restart the line. Thanks to the new monitoring system, no empty boxes were shipped out anymore. A few weeks later, the CEO reviewed the reports. Since the scales had been installed, no empty boxes had shipped. The data showed about a dozen defective boxes being removed every day, exactly as projected. Customer complaints had almost vanished, and market share was growing. The CEO was pleased. The $8 million seemed well spent, but as the weeks passed, the number of defective boxes being flagged dropped to 0. Concerned, the CEO filed a bug report and instructed the engineers to investigate. After a quick look, the engineers confirmed that the system was working properly. The scales weren't detecting any defects because, indeed, all the boxes reaching the scale were in good condition. Curious, the CEO went to the factory floor to see for himself. He stood by the scale and watched the conveyor belt. Just before the scales, he spotted a $20 desk fan blowing empty boxes off the belt and into a bin. Confused, he asked the line supervisor, "What's going on here?" The supervisor replied casually, "Oh, that's Bert from maintenance. He got tired of stopping the line every time the bell rang, so he put the fan there to blow the empty boxes off the belt before they even reached the scale." A timekeeper at a factory was responsible for blowing the whistle for lunch break at noon. Every day, she made sure to blow the whistle right when the clock struck 12. One day, she bumped her watch and worried it might be slightly off. Concerned about her job, she decided to have her watch professionally calibrated. She went to a clockmaker and explained her situation, emphasizing how important it was for her watch to be precise. The clockmaker reassured her, saying he set his own watch by the clocks in the back of the shop, which were always accurate. He confidently added that he made sure the clocks were precise every Sunday when the church bells rang at 6 a.m. The woman left the shop feeling satisfied, but then began to wonder, how does the church know exactly when it's 6 a.m.? So she went to the church and asked the bell ringer how he knew when to ring the bells and how he ensured his watch was accurate. The bell ringer replied, "I always ring the bells exactly when my watch strikes 6 a.m. I'm sure my watch is accurate." He paused, then added, "I check it every day at noon when the factory blows the whistle for lunch." A beautiful young model boarded a plane to New York with a ticket for the economy section. She glanced at the cramped seats in economy, then looked longingly at the spacious first-class section. Seeing the luxurious seats, she decided to move forward and take the last empty seat in first class. The flight attendant quickly approached and reminded her that her ticket was for economy. The model replied confidently, "I'm a famous model, and I've never had this problem before. I'm sitting here all the way to New York." Flustered, the flight attendant went to the cockpit and informed the captain. He came back and told the woman again that her assigned seat was in economy, but the model insisted, "I'm a famous model. I'm sitting here until we reach New York." Wanting to avoid a scene, the captain went to the co-pilot and asked for advice. The co-pilot, who had dated a model in the past, said, "Don't worry, I've got this." He went back to the model, whispered something in her ear, and within moments, she stood up, gave him a hug, and rushed back to her seat in economy. Curious, the pilot and flight attendant asked the co-pilot what he had said to her. With a sly smile, the co-pilot replied, "I told her the first-class seats aren't going to New York." A man brought his 4-year-old son to the doctor, visibly stressed and exasperated. He said, "Doctor, You won't believe what's happened. My son, he's only 4 years old, and he got the housemaid pregnant." The doctor, completely shocked, asked, "Wait, what? How on earth could that happen?" The man sighed, looked at his son, and explained, "Well, this little troublemaker poked holes in all my condoms with a needle." One day, while on patrol, a police officer pulled over a car for speeding. He approached the vehicle and asked the driver to roll down her window. The first thing that caught his attention, besides the sleek red sports car, was how stunning the driver was. Blue eyes, blonde hair, and all. "I pulled you over for speeding, ma'am," said the officer. "Could I see your driver's license?" "What's a license?" the blonde replied, immediately showing she wasn't quite up to speed. "It's usually in your wallet," the officer said, trying to remain patient. After some fumbling, the woman managed to find it. "Now, may I see your registration?" asked the cop. "Registration? What's that?" she asked, looking puzzled. "It's usually in your glove compartment," he said, growing more frustrated, more fumbling, and she eventually pulled it out. "I'll be right back," the officer said, and walked back to his car. He called in the woman's details to dispatch. A few moments later, the dispatcher responded. "Is this woman driving a red sports car?" asked the dispatcher. "Yes," replied the officer. "Is she a drop-dead gorgeous blonde?" the dispatcher asked with a grin in his voice. Yes," the officer replied, growing confused. "Okay, here's what you do," said the dispatcher. "Give her the stuff back, then drop your pants." "What? I can't do that. It's inappropriate," the officer exclaimed. "Trust me," said the dispatcher, still smiling. "Just do it." The officer, though skeptical, decided to follow the dispatcher's advice. He went back to the car, handed over the license and registration, then, to the blonde's surprise, dropped his pants. She looked down at his exposed legs, sighed, and said, "Oh no, not another breathalyzer." A blonde lived with 2 blonde roommates. One day she bought a brand new car, and on the way home from the dealer, she got caught in a terrible hailstorm. Her car was dented all over. When she got home, she immediately called the service department to ask what she should do. They offered to send the car to a mechanic, but she would have to pay for it. She explained that she had absolutely no money and begged if they could send someone anyway. The service chief, being a bit of a prankster, suggested, "Well, why don't you wait until the car cools down and then blow really hard on the tailpipe? It should pop all the dents out." Half an hour later, her roommates saw her on her knees behind the car, blowing as hard as she could. Confused, they asked, "What in the world are you doing?" The blonde replied, "I'm trying to get the dents out, but it's not working." One of her roommates rolled her eyes and said, "You dummy, you're supposed to roll up the windows first." A brunette, a redhead, and a blonde all worked in the same office with the same female boss. Every day they noticed their boss would leave work early. After a while, they decided that whenever their boss left, they'd leave right behind her. After all, she never called in or returned to the office once she left, so how would she know? The next day, they all 3 left the office just after the boss. The brunette was thrilled to get home early, did some gardening, and went to bed early. The redhead was excited to fit in a quick workout at the gym before meeting her dinner date. The blonde, overjoyed to be home early, walked to her bedroom and heard a muffled noise from inside. Slowly, she cracked open the door and was mortified to find her husband in bed with her boss. Quietly, she closed the door and tiptoed out of the house. The next day, the brunette and redhead asked the blonde if she was leaving early with them again. "No way," the blonde replied. "I almost got caught yesterday." A blonde calls 911 frantic and tells the dispatcher, "My car's been broken into. They've stolen the dashboard, the steering wheel, the brake pedal, and even the accelerator." The dispatcher, trying to calm her down, says, "Stay calm, ma'am. An officer will be there in 2 minutes." Before the police arrive, the 911 dispatcher gets another call. It's the same blonde. This time, she giggles and says, "Never mind, I got into the back seat by mistake." It was George the mailman's last day on the job. As he made his rounds, he received a thoughtful gift from every house he visited. At the first house, an elderly couple gave him a gift certificate. At the next, a family handed him a set of fishing lures. And at the third house, he was given a box of fine cigars. But at the next house, a stunning blonde in a revealing negligee greeted him. Without saying a word, she beckoned him inside. She led him upstairs and passionately made love to him. Afterward, she brought him downstairs and prepared a delicious breakfast: toast, sausage, eggs, and hash browns. George was thoroughly satisfied. As he reached for his second cup of coffee, he noticed a dollar bill tucked under the cup. Curious, he asked, "This is all wonderful, but what's the dollar for?" The blonde smiled and said, "I asked my husband what we should give you for your retirement, and he said, 'Screw him, give him a dollar. The breakfast part was my idea.'" A blonde husband and his blonde wife were traveling together on a long train journey. They were excited about their trip and settled into their seats, enjoying the scenic views as the train chugged along. As the journey progressed, the wife suddenly looked alarmed and turned to her husband. "Honey, I need to tell you something," she said. "The guy sitting beside me just reached over and put his hand in my pants." The husband, who had been reading a newspaper, looked up with a calm expression. "Oh, no, really?" he asked. "What happened next?" The wife, still visibly shaken, replied, "I'm not sure. I was so stunned that I didn't know how to react. I thought maybe you could help me figure out what to do." The husband, staying calm, replied with a grin, "Don't worry, sweetheart, don't worry. The money is in my pants pocket." A young woman approached a doctor with a concerned look and said, "This baby hasn't been drinking milk for 2 days." Determined to resolve the issue, the young doctor decided to check her shirt, suspecting there might be a problem with the milk supply. He carefully examined and pressed her shirt in various places, hoping to find some trace of milk. After a thorough inspection, he looked up with a puzzled expression and said, "Madam, there's no milk here at all. It seems you're right. There's no milk available." The young woman, observing the doctor's confusion, couldn't help but smile. She replied, "You should have asked before inspecting. I'm the baby's aunt, not his mother. I don't produce milk." A young woman was caught by the police in the cemetery, along with 2 boys, and they were all brought before the police officer on charges of indulging in obscenity. The officer decided to question them one by one. He turned to the first boy and asked, "Who are you and what were you doing there?" The boy, trying to keep a straight face, replied, "I was playing the violin, sir." The police officer, not particularly amused but willing to overlook it, took $50 and let the boy go. He then asked the second boy the same question. "And you, who are you and what were you doing there?" The second boy, following the first boy's lead, confidently said, "I was also playing the violin, sir." The officer sighed, took another $50, and let him go as well. Finally, it was the young woman's turn. The officer looked at her and asked, "And you? Were you also playing the violin?" The young woman, with a slight smile, replied, "No, sir. My name is Violin. A tailor ran away with everyone's clothes. Some were left shirtless, others were frantically searching for their trousers. Amidst all the chaos, a blonde woman was sitting on the ground, crying her eyes out. Concerned, people gathered around her and asked, "Why are you crying?" The blonde, between sobs, replied, "That scoundrel didn't just take my clothes, he took my measurements." A drunk man came home late one night, swaying on his feet and fumbling with the key to his front door. The key slipped from his hand repeatedly, his unsteady fingers betraying him every time he tried to insert it into the lock. Frustrated, he cursed under his breath, his drunken state making the simplest task feel impossible. As he continued to struggle, a passerby noticed his predicament and offered to help. "Shall I open it for you?" the person asked kindly. The drunk man, barely registering the offer, waved him off with a slurred voice. "I'll open it myself. You just hold the house steady." Sally was driving home from a business trip in northern Arizona when she spotted an elderly woman walking along the side of the road. Feeling the trip was dragging on, Sally pulled over and offered the woman a ride. The old woman gave a grateful nod and climbed in without a word. As they drove, Sally tried to strike up a conversation, but the woman remained silent, her eyes scanning the passing landscape with deep concentration. After a while, she noticed a brown bag sitting on the seat beside Sally. "What's in the bag?" she asked. Sally glanced down and replied, "It's a bottle of wine. I bought it for my husband." The woman paused for a beat, then with a knowing smile said, "Good trade." A widower, fresh into retirement, bought a house near a high school. For the first few weeks, life was peaceful. But as the new school year started, things began to change. One afternoon, 3 mischievous boys marched down the street, happily banging on every trash bin they passed. They repeated the performance the next day and the next, continuing for a full week. Finally, the man decided it was time to intervene. The next afternoon, he stepped outside and stopped the boys in their tracks as they made their noisy march. "You kids sure know how to have fun," he said. "In fact, I did the same thing when I was your age. Tell you what, I'll pay you each $1 if you promise to keep doing it." The boys eagerly agreed, and the banging continued. A few days later, the man came out again, but this time with a sad smile. "Well, folks, the economy's tough," he said. "From now on, I can only give you 50 cents each to keep it up." The boys weren't thrilled, but continued their noise-making. A few days later, the man appeared once more, looking even more troubled. "The recession's hitting me harder than I thought," he said, "so now I can only offer you 25 cents each." The leader of the group threw his hands up in frustration. "That's it? You think we're going to keep banging these bins for a quarter each? Forget it! We quit!" And with that, the man finally got the peace and quiet he'd been hoping for the rest of his days. A burglar breaks into a home holding the husband and wife at gunpoint. He forces them to sit in chairs and ties them up. Then the burglar goes about robbing the house, taking everything of value. As he's finishing up, he prepares to leave, leaving the couple still bound to their chairs. Suddenly, the man starts pleading, "Please untie her, please let her go." The burglar, determined not to leave any loose ends, shakes his head. "No, I can't untie either of you. I need to make sure the authorities get notified as late as possible." The man continues to beg. "Please, just let her go. I'll do anything." The burglar, feeling a bit guilty, says, "Look, I can't leave anything up to chance. I need to get away clean." The man, now frantic, cries, "She won't call the cops, I swear! Just untie her." The burglar, touched by how desperately the man cares for his wife, looks at him in surprise. "Wow, you really must love her to beg like this." The man pauses, then replies, "Not really. It's just that she'll be home in 15 minutes. A deaf mute steps up to tee off on the first hole of a golf course when a large, burly guy yells, "Hey, you! Nobody tees off ahead of Big Ralph!" Not hearing him, the deaf mute continues to prepare for his shot. Frustrated, Ralph charges up, thinking the guy's ignoring him on purpose. He knocks the poor man to the ground, kicks his ball away, and tees up for his own shot. After Ralph hits the ball and heads down the fairway, the mute gets up, dusts himself off, waits a moment, and calmly tees up again. This time he hits a perfect shot straight down the fairway and straight at Ralph. The ball smacks Ralph in the back of the head, sending him sprawling. The mute walks over, rolls the dazed Ralph onto his back, and holds up 4 fingers in front of his face. Ralph, still dazed, mutters, "What are you doing?" The mute smiles and signs, "4, that's how many strokes it took me to get here." 2 friends are out on the golf course, getting ready to tee off, when one notices that his buddy only has 1 golf ball. "Don't you have at least 1 other ball?" he asks. "Nope," the other guy replies. "I only need this one." "Are you sure?" his friend presses. "What if you lose it?" The guy confidently says, "This is a very special golf ball. I won't lose it." "Really?" his friend asks, skeptical. "What if you miss your shot and it lands in the lake?" "No problem," the guy responds. "This ball floats. I'll just retrieve it." "Okay," his friend continues. "But what if you hit it into the trees and it gets lost in the bushes?" The guy grins. "Easy. This ball has a homing beacon. I'll find it no matter what." His friend, now getting a bit exasperated, asks, "All right, but what happens if our game goes late? The sun sets, and you hit it into a sand trap?" The guy laughs. "That's nothing. This ball is fluorescent. I'll be able to see it in the dark." Finally, after hearing all this, the friend asks, "Where in the world did you find a golf ball like that?" The other guy shrugs and says, "I found it." A man is out on the golf course when he hears someone shout, "Four!" He looks around but doesn't see the ball until, Whack! The ball strikes him, and he immediately doubles over, clutching his crotch in pain. "Oh, you poor thing!" A woman cries, rushing over to help. She kneels down and begins gently rubbing his groin. "Is that better?" she asks. He shakes his head, so she pulls his pants down and continues rubbing more urgently. After a few minutes, she smiles and says, "That seems to have helped a lot." "That was amazing," he replies, relieved. "But, the ball hit my thumb."
If you've made it this far, I'm guessing you enjoyed the video. Why not hit that subscribe button